Hi, welcome to the Fiffe Files. My name is Michelle Fiffe, and this is it. This is the final episode of my huge Keith Giffen retrospective. It's a video series where I've tracked the stylistic changes and evolution of cartoonist Keith Giffen. We've covered lots of decades, lots of books. It's been tons of comic books. And this is a bittersweet episode because we've arrived at the end, but there's a lot of work to look at, pretty much. But before we get to that, I just want to break down where we've been. The first episode covered his Marvel years and his breaking in as a 20-something-year-old, and DC as well. But really, he worked a lot for Marvel, and then he took a break, a couple years, returned to comics, mostly for DC, mostly for Legion of Superheroes, and became a fan favorite. Cut to episode 2. We see his burnout on the Legion of Superheroes and him experimenting with styles and somewhat of an appropriation of different styles, and getting into trouble for that, you know, in the critical sphere, right? And so that sort of changed his professional trajectory a little bit, which led to the third episode of working more at Marvel, returning to Marvel, doing way more experimental stuff, working for the small press of the mid 80s. We're talking about the mid 80s now. So he's now in his 30s. And then coming back to DC in a small way, but then in a big way. And that was pretty much the fourth episode, which is he was in charge of leading the Legion of Superheroes rebrand, pretty much, the 5 years later era. Very polarizing, very masterful, very frustrating for him as a creator. And we uncovered all that stuff in the fourth episode. In the fifth episode, that was his Trencher era. Those were the independent years, his move to Image Comics, working with other independent publishers in the mid 90s, early to mid 90s. And he was total freelance. He wasn't really stuck to any part of the universe or in the comics world. He was doing all sorts of stuff for all sorts of publishers. And so what we have now for today, we're at late 1998. The late 90s, and he's been kind of flirting with coming back to Marvel and DC. So he's been out and about doing his thing, doing his Trencher style, and he's been kind of snapping back into his previous style. And so what we're going to see here is sort of a culmination of all those approaches. And it's interesting, his layout game is going to be different as well. So I want to start taking a look at this stuff, starting with Shadows and Light, number 3. This is a Marvel Comics black and white series. And the thing is, you know, DC at the time had Batman black and white, so Marvel had this black and white counterattack. That's what goes on with these companies all the time. You must know this. You know, there's the DC Who's Who, Marvel has O.M.A.C, Secret Wars, Crisis on Infinite Earths, what have you. But for this black and white issue, we have Keith Giffen in a rare writing his own story. You know, he did that previously on Punks for Valiant Comics. He did that for about 3 issues where he wrote Andrew the comic. He's doing that here for a short Spider-Man story inked by Andy Smith. And so what we have here is just like an 8-pager. You can see his style in that sort of it's not a scratchy line. It's just kind of craggly a little bit. It's very interesting. It suits Spider-Man, I think. He does a great Spider-Man. He did that one issue of Spectacular Spider-Man back in 85, 86, inked by Vinnie Coletta, and that was about the only other time he had drawn Spider-Man in a big way. And so this is somewhat his return to the character. It's pretty interesting. And this might be the last thing that he wrote Andrew. He was never really that kind of creator. He would always collaborate. Even if he was drawing a thing and he could easily write it, he would just have a writer do it, have an inker ink him. He was a team player in that way. So following this, we have this run of Webspinners. This came out around the same time, 98, 99. And he drew all the covers, and these are cool. Same inker, Andy Smith, who, by the way, Andy Smith is his style is more like a Bart Sears, a tight, clean line. And for here, he seems to just be really faithful to Keith Giffen's pencils. We've seen some of his pencil work before, and it's pretty tight pencil work. So you see like his layouts are, still 9 panel grid, nothing too crazy. I think his experimenting has dwindled. He's really just about like a solid storytelling technique. He doesn't want to get too fancy. He's employing a kind of Kirby approach to the cropping of panels, that close up Dutch, just little Kirbyisms he's really leaning into. And the thing is, Kirby, we've seen this all throughout his career. He was big on Kirby. That's in his DNA. He's, first started as like very much a Kirby clone for Defenders at the behest, he thought, of Marvel editor in chief Jim Shooter, but he's always had Kirby in him. He's always had that sort of blockiness in his work, and the way he would stage a panel or a scene, and also just like the sheer power that he would bring to some of these drawings. There were never huge panels. He's been doing less and less of that. It's really just the tightness of a shot. It's a lot of grid action. This is probably as big as you're going to get in the middle of the story, other than a splash page. It's sort of it's absolutely a fight scene, but it's pretty Giffen-esque. It's pretty different. You don't see a Spider-Man kick the Silver Surfer in the head like that very often. So it's interesting stuff. It only lasted these 3 issues. Well, actually, only 2, because he only drew the 2 issues. But we continue the story here, written by Eric Stevenson, now in charge of Image Comics. But he was an Image writer back then, and then he would freelance here and there for stuff like this. He was a friend of Keith's. They've worked together on Extreme Books over at Image. It's funny, when I first met Eric Stevenson at a New York Comic Con many years ago, I was introduced to him by a peer. I was a young wannabe trying to get stuff published and stuff, and was some after party thing. And I saw Eric Stevenson. I was introduced to him, and the first thing I asked him was about this story, about what it was like working with Keith. And of course, he was very gracious and polite, and then got away from me. And then my friend who introduced me was like, "Nice going," as if like, what was I supposed to do? Like schmooze about my own career? Like, who gives a crap? I want to hear about Keith. Anyway, so even back then, I'm just saying, I was obsessed with this stuff, and especially this 2-part story. I mean, it's a 3-part story, but Keith doesn't really. I mean, he drew the covers, but Andy Smith took over, and yeah, so you see, it's a much smoother line, and you could tell like he was just like the way he. Let me see. He inks himself here, yeah. He does. So it's like you could see it's a smooth line, as opposed to the Keith stuff, which is just real sketchy, real. I don't know. It's again, it's not sketchy. It's very controlled. It's very tight, but it's not smooth. And I think it lends itself well to this story. Now we're back to DC. This is a kind of it's an anthology book. It's got stories. It's got pinups, tons of pinups. But Keith drew this pinup right here of Darkseid's Elite. There you go. In that punk style again, which is very much it's scratchy, it's Kirby, it's blocky, but it's not shrouded in shadows. It's still claustrophobic. It's still very much Keith Giffen. It's unmistakably him, and we get it for this one shot. We also get it for this one issue of Legion of Superheroes 1 million, which is was a crossover event. Tons of everyone got this treatment, this 1 million treatment, 1 million year treatment, which he drew. Al Gordon's back. Al Gordon, inker and writer partner for Legion of Superheroes, the 5 years later run. But again, it is very much, we are in late 90s Giffen territory. Like he's solidifying into something that is just going to be a consistent, steady momentum. It's reliable. It's solid. It's not workman-like in that it's not journeyman-like in that it's boring or predictable, but it is very solid, very consistent. I recall Mike Barr thinking you never knew what you were going to get with Keith at a certain point in the 80s. Not so much here. You kind of knew what you were going to get, and it was going to be wonderful. And he would throw a couple of curveballs here and there, but never really in the layouts, never really in a sort of a wild approach or anything like that. It's all pretty, not standard. This just looks solid. It just, to me, it just looks like it's super clear storytelling in that style. So it's not only in the layout style, but the actual rendering of faces and bodies and backgrounds. It's come together almost. And what we're talking about here, up to this point, we've been covering his career in increments of about 3 to 5 years. We're going to be talking about pretty much 20 years here because he stopped drawing as much. He drew a lot, don't get me wrong, but he really just started to write a whole lot more, and not just layouts and plots and stuff, which is what he would do in the beginning of the Justice League and Legion and stuff. No, he would straight up become a scripter and write tons of stories and comics and for all sorts of stuff, all sorts of stuff. So he wouldn't be drawing as much. He would always come in for like an issue here and there. If it, under whatever circumstances, it could be late. They just needed a fill in. Nice Superman shot. So again, I always get a thrill whenever he draws like sort of one of these little cameos of the standard DC universe, because that's sort of the appeal for me in the 80s stuff too. It was a different way of seeing all those iconic characters. And I thought that was great. I mean, there you get Orion, more Superman, more Keith Giffen-esque humor. Back to Marvel, we're going to be doing some ping-ponging here because that was just, he would go where the work was. He always sought out work. He was never waiting around to be called upon. Apparently that only happened about 3 times in his career. So here we have a pinup. He's just redesigning characters. He's still designing characters. I believe he designed those Legion 1 million characters. Now he's doing these X-Punks. Of course, that's what they hit him up with. He just came off of Punks. And this is an anthology title of just redesigned X-Men. And he pretty much leads the book with X-Punks. Now, I don't believe anything was done with any of these characters, with these specifically, but any of these. I could be wrong about that, but who knows? Next, we have World's Greatest Comics Magazine. Fantastic Four. This was an Eric Larson initiative in which he took up where Stan Lee and Jack Kirby left off. And he amassed a team of Kirby acolytes, clones, enthusiasts to kind of make up stories as if they were Stan Lee and Jack Kirby themselves. Keith had a hand in pretty much these 6 issues. Well, it was a 12-issue series, but Keith was involved in the first 6. And again, there he is. You could tell it's him. Again, it's super interesting because yes, the gig was to do Kirby, but he's still doing his own version of Kirby. And to me, it just stands out more than the others. Because you got guys like Bruce Timm, the mighty Ron Frenz. You could tell immediately when it's Ron Frenz too. But this has all sorts of inkers, all sorts of pencilers. There's Keith again, doing a great Doom. And this is very much a moment in time. I mean, again, very Kirby. It's exactly Kirby, but you could just tell it's Keith doing his thing. It's all these energy lines. It's mark making. He's somehow made it his own. It's remarkable in a way. Now we're talking about the year 2000. This is like strictly the new millennium. And again, for all these issues, he would just do a chunk. He would do a quick chunk. And immediately you could tell that's him. I mean, there's a credits box in the back that clarifies it, but you could spot it a mile away. Great Spider-Man. He's really good at Spider-Man. Even the Kirby-ish level of Spider-Man, He just nails it. He makes it his own again. And so this is more of the same, just more Doctor Doom stuff, Latveria stuff. I believe this was reprinted or collected kind of recently, but for the longest time, you could only get it through these issues. So again, it's just 6 issues that Keith was involved in. Fantastic stuff. I mean, yeah, you could tell just even in that mouth. That's a straight up Giffen mouth. For this issue, he only drew the cover, inked by Bruce Timm. That's a rare collaboration right there. Pretty nice standard cover, you know. And now we're back to DC doing this. There's a comic called The Power Company, and this was an offshoot. It had several offshoots focusing on characters. And so Keith drew this one. Some hawk people flying through the city. I mean, it's that it's in that style. I love it. I love it. In terms of for the purposes of the show and tracking the evolution, it's evolving in a it's not that it's not evolving. It's just a little slower. Again, it's just very it's in service to telling a story and to get the job done. Whereas before, I think he was just pushing to just not get bored with himself or with his work. And here, I think he's locked into something that he could just do the work and maybe not think about stuff, maybe not have to slow down. And it's almost like he transcended his own station in a weird way. Again, Firestorm, Wonder Woman, great cameos, great shot of the Justice League in shadows. I mean, I love that stuff. More Superman, the old Bwahaha Justice League roster, more Superman, more DC. And this time for just a 4-issue intro. This is a dream sequence, and it's drawn in a Golden Age Kirby, Golden Age comics, really, as inked by Joe Simon. You could tell by this, by just the weird paneling. This is about as experimental as it's going to get for him. Unless I'm misremembering. I don't know. We'll see. We will see it. Dominion, Image Comics. So he's not only doing work for Marvel and DC, he's keeping a foot in this independent pool. Like he's just he's developing new ideas. Again, he's becoming a writer. He's becoming, he was he adapted Battle Royale. He wanted to adapt Catch 22 at one point. He was pitching a horror script with a makeup artist attached to the script. He was doing stuff. He was just hustling. He was just trying to get work done. He was just getting his name out there. Again, remaining on the stands, that was important to him, to just have a presence on the shelves for the fans to follow, to, whether it be to follow it for him or follow a book for whatever reason. He just needed to be out there. Now, if you'll notice that the first issue was color, now it's in black and white. That happens sometimes whenever a book just pivots in sales wise, perhaps, or maybe it was an artistic decision. I'm not sure about this one. But we will remain in the independent sphere with this cover, this variant cover for Mark Millar's The Unfunnies for Avatar Press. He didn't do anything else except this big ass thumb. It's pretty cool. Back to Legion, back to DC. Now this is what, May 2004. So it's been a few years now. See, not that much, not that much. An issue here or there for a year. Great spread. Great spread. It's in that sort of Legion 1 million style, Lots of cool tech, kind of beat up, kind of shiny in places. But this is straight up just to fill an issue. Like, I don't know what the Legion was at this time. I don't know if it was part of the 3 boot or right before the 3 boot. Basically, after his 5 years later run, and then the 0 hour crossover happens, things get a little murky for me as a reader, as a follower of the Legion. Because Keith Giffen being the primary reason I followed those books, I dip in and out of those books. So I'm not sure exactly where this stands story wise, but visually, it's pretty cool. It's a little bit cartoony. But it's not Bigfoot. You know what I mean? It's not like Looney Tunes, but there's a cartoonishness to it. You know, there's an exaggeration to it, and it's still somewhat representative, but it's abstract in portions. Good to see the 9-panel grid back and that classic Giffen crop of the eye, nose, mouth. So yeah, he was a writer. He was a writer, and now we're going to enter a pretty significant era of him as a writer at Marvel, starting with this title and this storyline, which leads to Annihilation, and Annihilation being Marvel's huge cosmic storyline. And it sort of started here. I mean, there's an Annihilation prelude that I believe Keith wrote, and he wrote a good chunk of that storyline, which led to the reemergence of Guardians of the Galaxy and all the cosmic characters, Nova and Rocket Raccoon and stuff. Anyway, he did draw the covers for these, and that's why I'm bringing them out, because we are tracking his visual journey. Ron Lim drew the insides, and I believe Keith might have laid this out. It's got Keith ticks, stylistic ticks, but that could also be Ron Lim. But visually, you see him kind of draw the cosmic side of Marvel again. It had been decades. It's been since the 70s. I don't think he had approached these characters. And there's Ron Lim. I just have this because of the ending of the storyline. But he's staying at Marvel visually, at least. Again, he becomes a writer. He writes just tons of stuff. At this point, in 2005, 2006, he's writing articles for CBR, comicbookresources.com, for wizard.com. Oh, by the way, this is written by Peter David. So that's an interesting pairing, because Peter David's like, quote unquote, was the funny dude of Marvel. He had always had a sense of humor and personality to his work, and so did Keith. So they were sort of like counterparts in a weird way. So we see them team up here. But yeah, Keith was writing articles online, just posts, opinion pieces, and talking about the industry, talking about who he'd like to work with. He was a big Byrne guy. He loved John Byrne, and he said he would drop everything to work with a talent as massive as John Byrne. And he wasn't being facetious. I don't think they've never really worked together, as far as I could tell. I haven't seen him in these pages to that capacity, which is too bad. But yeah, he admitted to doing that. That's when he talked about loving Giant Man, wanting at least one issue of the Impossible Man. And so yeah, this is sort of like a fourth wall breaking issue. So it's pretty appropriate for Keith. Keith would always end these stories with a character kind of like walking away, slumped. Happened in Ambush Bug, happened in the Book of Fate. Next up for DC, he drew this Julie Schwartz themed issue. A bunch of these happened. He drew the second half of this issue. The first half was drawn by Darwin Cook. Stan Lee wrote this one. Now Paul Levitz, reunited with Paul Levitz, Keith Giffen drew this one. More Superman action. And it's sort of a take on an old Silver Age DC book. And that's what we have here pretty much. It's a nice, solid, almost splash page of Superman. Again, you don't see this stuff as much. So it's nice when it does happen. And it seems like he does it for effect. He's doing it because it would have more impact. See, it's based on, that's the original cover. That's the Adam Hughes redo. Great stuff. Back to indies. Atomica books. I'm back with J.M. DeMatteis, who he was working with the Justice League, the Bwahaha era, the version that they developed. They were doing that at DC. Keith was doing layouts and plots the way they used to. And so they did this for Hero² Exercise Special. This was a book that they launched. So Keith did this cover, right? He didn't draw the inside, but I don't know how long this lasted. I think it was recently collected. And I also have this weird version of the same comic signed by Keith and sort of a comic book cover. Again, breaking the fourth wall, talking to the reader, the characters complaining to the reader. And check this out, Certificate of Authenticity. That's pretty special. I haven't opened it because, you know, it's tamper resistant. And who am I to tamper with this? Now, this sketchbook, Atomica sketchbook, has this great Kevin Maguire image, which was used as a cover. Maybe it was a cover first, but it has a little reproduction of this cover right here, but just in a different way, just a slightly different. The characters are swapped, and this huge character looks small, not smaller, just positioned differently rather than right here. So I don't know, pretty interesting stuff. Just very, you blink and you miss it. Same with this cover. You wouldn't even really know it was Keith Giffen unless you looked closely, but again, kind of a funny cover, very Excalibur #4. Meaning it's just a drawing with a lot of text. Making jokes. Just nothing but jokes. Got zombie tales. Keith is now working with Boom. And this is an anthology book. And Keith drew, there's Ron Lim, and Keith is doing the art for this. Now this, I don't know if this was shot from pencils, but this was around the time when that was happening more and more. You know, All-Star, Superman was done like that, but just a bunch of comics or a bunch of books at Marvel were done like that, where it was just, the pencil would just pencil so tightly and they would just scan it from that, crank up the register, the threshold, and just that would be enough. That would, you know, enough lines to make it seem like a drawing. Now check this out. This was Zombie Tales Oblivion #1. This is Zombie Tales, just another Zombie Tales. It's not the same. It's a different issue. And Keith drew this story on this wonderful glossy 2006 paper. That was the standard back then. We went from newsprint to Baxter, now to this. So forgive any reflection, but that's the reality. Yeah, this stuff looks like it's pencil. Like it is a craggier line. And you could tell. Now you see this. This is a variant that he did for chud.com. I believe that was a store. I don't know if it was a brick and mortar, but it was certainly a web store. And so there you go. Zombie Tales. That's the cover. Pretty nice stuff. Cool to see it in color. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. He's still drawing that story, but with his own cover. More stuff. More independent stuff. Fire Breather. Check this out. He did that pinup. It only appears here in this book, in this collection. Fire Breather was part of the superhero launch of Image Comics back around this time. I believe Invincible came from that era, and Fire Breather was a contemporary of his. And this is a Keith Giffen pinup. He would also draw this variant for Godland, Joe Casey and Tom Scioli's Godland. This was, they didn't really do many variants, but They did it for Keith, and Eric Larson inked this. Probably can't really tell. You could tell with this arm right here, but this being a color hold, it's difficult to kind of identify. But yeah, that's pretty cool. They rarely collaborated artistically, so this is really neat to see. He also did a cover for Grunts. I believe this is a variant cover. I don't know much about this comic, Arcana, but Keith had a hand in developing this project. He was the writer and I believe co-creator, but you don't really see much about it. This is to me this is super rare. Given the shininess and the colors, you could barely make it out, but it's definitely Keith. Back to Marvel, you get this Where Monsters Dwell. He only drew the first story. Occasionally Marvel does these sort of anthologies, these themed anthologies. And this is just a callback to the almost the Atlas years of Marvel Comics, just big monster type. It's obviously going for a retro feel with the dot patterns, the zipatone kind of coloring. That was sort of becoming trendy around the time as well, just mimicking the Silver Age. Tons of people are doing it. I mean, they had been doing it for a couple years, but you would see it more often around this time. There's a cover for Marvel Romance Redo, but I thought he loved me. Now, this was they would just take these old stories and rewrite them, just put funny captions on them. Keith wrote a couple of them, but luckily he also drew one of these covers. And so back to DC. And this is, I feel like this is all happening all at once. Like we're covering tons of years here, but Keith is always working. He's now just a steady worker in the field. He's a veteran at this point. He's a legend. You know, he has his reputation, and he's back at DC. Even though DC, it's super interesting because around this time, when he was gone, around 2003, 2004, they were I don't want to say dismantling his creations, but they were doing stuff to his characters that would piss off any creator. But when I heard that he didn't really care, it just kind of showed me that he's just not sentimental about this stuff. Keith did not care. This is just a job. These are just characters to be molded to entertain people and to sell books. He was never he was always aware of that. He wasn't ever like too territorial about this stuff or sensitive about this stuff at all, right? Where other creators, if you do something to characters they help mold or create, they get a little nonplussed about it. Not Keith, not at all. And that sort of opened my eyes because they were doing some crazy stuff to his characters. And on the flip side, he was doing the Justice League stuff with James DeMatteis, revisiting those characters almost in a different universe. So that was happening at the same time. It was pretty interesting. All that stuff led to 52, which was a huge project for DC, a huge event where they would do an issue a week for a year. And so Keith drew the backup for this issue for Lobo. Now, Mark Waid would write all the profiles. These 2 pages would be dedicated to any given character. In this issue, we have Lobo, and there's like his origin told in a few panels, which was not easy from what I hear. I mean, it doesn't sound easy at all just to try to summarize a complete character in just 2 pages and have it be effective and compelling. Yeah, it is. It seems difficult. Luckily, Keith drew this. Now, Keith, for this series, he would do layouts. He did layouts for the entire thing. And like I mentioned for the Justice League stuff, that what that means is that he would do sketchy drawings, and he would lay out the book to stage the characters for the penciler, whoever the penciler would be, for them to then just draw it. And because this was an exercise in speed and books had to be produced in a week as opposed to a month, this had 4 writers. This had several artists, but Keith was a consistent storyteller, and so that held it all together in in an underlying way. You don't know it. It's sort of the unspoken language almost of this stuff. But you could kind of tell. Again, Keith is one of, even his layouts, you could tell it's him, especially in certain beats, certain reveals. Anyway, this issue, he drew it. So well worth seeking out. He drew this Aftermath one shot. Well, the cover. He wrote it, but he drew this cover. And again, you can't really tell because it's an alien like being atop of rubble and bodies. But for this Action Comics variant, you could already tell that he's getting way blockier. Inked by Al Milgrom. So they would be a consistent team for a while. This is for the Jeff Johns run. Gary Frank on Action Comics. Great variant. This is when variants were becoming a thing more than ever. This was really gaining steam, the variant game. And here's another variant for the return of Ambush Bug. That's right. Robert Loren Fleming came back. He hadn't written comics in a while, but they reunited for Ambush Bug, year none, right? This is post Identity. I mean, all the huge crossovers for DC. This is all, it's in the middle of it. So it's just going to be mocking a bunch of it. Lots of in jokes, a lot of, poking at the tropes. And you'll notice that not as much experimenting. The previous Ambush Bug run, at least the first two minis were pretty out there, pretty wild. This has a through line with the occasional gag thrown in. But it's still very much like a story. Inked by Al Milgrom. Little Blue Beetle action. You get tons of cameos. You know I'm here for that. Cover by Jim Starlin. So yeah, you got a bunch. Amanda Connor, Brian Stelfreeze, Kevin McGuire homaging himself. The Justice League #1 cover. Yeah, but this is more of the same. This features tons of old DC characters, kind of repurposed for this storyline. And it's just chaos. It's just typical chaos, except now it's sort of making fun of the then current DC regime. Again, lots of gloss, but you will have to take my word for it that this stuff sings. It's great. You got Keith drawing a Golden Age Superman again and some crisis characters. Nice little Wayne Boring pose. I'm pretty sure that's Wayne Boring. It's that classic Silver Age pose. Getting to do Darkseid again, that's always a treat. That was an Ambush Bug staple back in the day, back in the first run. Now we will get back to Darkseid in a minute. Oh, there's Oddman. Ditko's very rarely seen Oddman. I believe he only appeared in an issue of Superboy, written by Carl Kiesel. But anyway, Oddman, that's great. Okay, so this lasted, wait for this, 5 issues. But it's a 6-issue miniseries, right? So what happened? Oh, well, Gut Wrencher happened. Well, really only just this cover, another project that he worked. There he is. There's a drawing of a Keith Giffen story and co-creator. He drew this variant. I believe it's a variant. This could be just the regular comic, but yeah, Gut Wrencher. But anyway, #6 did come out in the form of #7, and it came out a year afterwards, or almost a year. And from what I hear, this was complete already. This was already done prior to a year, but for some reason, the head at DC, Dan Didio, held it back, chopped it up, and inserted these new pages. Not by the typical team, not by Keith Giffen, not by Robert Loren Fleming. It's still unclear why that happened. These things could be a little chaotic. But Robert Loren Fleming learned about the changes too late to take his name off the credit boxes. So at least it came out. Issue 7, I guess it's an in joke. The 1 year late, which is a spoof on the 1 year later crossover that DC was doing at the time. And in a funny ribbing kind of way, it's like, oh, these guys are late. Giffen was late again, as if he had a problem with that throughout his career. Didn't seem like he did. Didn't seem like. I mean, other creators are kind of marred by that reputation. Keith, clearly from the 5 prior episodes, he did consistent monthly work for a long time. It wasn't just an era. Like, he was a consistent producer of comic books. Anyway, that's it. It kind of ends in, again, walking away into the nothing. Kind of depressing, kind of, especially if you know the backstory, where it's like it came out of nowhere, it was stalled, and then it just disappeared. This has never been collected. The previous stuff has been collected in a showcase format in black and white. It's been long out of print, but it's cool to look at. It's cool to see it in black and white. Now check this out. The Mad Hatter, #1. It's a one-shot. It's part of a larger Joker's Asylum storyline. Keith drawing the Joker is always a good time. However, he has never been inked by Bill Sienkiewicz. And it's a pretty neat combination because Bill Sienkiewicz, we all know him for his painted works and some of his inking. Whenever he inks someone, you'll know it's him because he will ink the hell out of it. He will spray ink, scratch the hell out of lines. I mean, you could see it here. Really expressive stuff in service of Keith's more subdued layouts. Even though this is a splash page, it's effective in the story. Back to 9-panel grid, statted panels with different hats. Now, I gotta say, look at that Batman treatment, just super energetic, super powerful. You never see this stuff really in this manner, not during this time. But to have it be rendered in that way looks very special. You see it here, down here, this little paste up of a golden age or silver age Batman head on a body. Seeing that for some reason, it made me realize that Sienkiewicz inking Giffen is Eric Larson. There are some issues of Eric Larson's Savage Dragon that it just looks like this. There's like a powerful curbiness to the work, but then there's a scratchy ink line. It's a great rare combination. You don't see it. Now, Keith would do pages in this. He wasn't the regular artist, but he would do the occasional scene only for this issue. Not bookends, but it really is random. And this is when J.M. DeMatteis was writing Booster Gold. He took over, I believe, from Jeff Johns was writing this. And so you get a bunch of Justice League characters, Justice League International bwahaha characters. And it's cool that we get Keith to draw some of them. Well, primarily Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. But it's good to see them, especially in the wake of what happened to some of them. Yeah, it's neat to see. One more variant. Legacies. This is sort of an anthology book that carries a bunch of just side stories pertaining to different eras of DC's history. But Keith did this variant featuring Legion of Superheroes and Superboy, but also this backup story. And here we are. Here we are. We are getting blocky Giffen ness. Like, it's just, this is it. This is about as far as he's going to push it. Interesting stuff. He's drawing lots of characters, lots of Legion stuff. It's almost like he's toying with fate, like he's just like, should I revisit this stuff? I kind of missed Legion. He's been known to say that Legion is that kind of book that just kind of draws you back in. So this is interesting. He was writing Doom Patrol at the time, and this is what I meant earlier, where he just rarely writes his own material or to draw. He got someone else to write it, and then he drew it. Now, I don't know who arranged this. I'm sure it was the editor who helped facilitate it, but there must have been some communication with Keith where he was like, I'll draw it, but I'm not going to write it. Maybe it just takes too long. Maybe it was a deadline thing, but it is super interesting because he could do it. He could clearly do it. There's Ambush Bug. Again, lots of cool characters. He was his run on Doom Patrol was pretty interesting because he was bringing every version of Doom Patrol together and sort of justifying all of their existences. He wasn't erasing anything. He wasn't ignoring anything. So it's underrated actually. It's pretty cool. I believe some of it has been reprinted, if not all. But now we are back to Legion. Now this is a killer issue. This is a real reunion with Paul Levitz and the Legion of Superheroes, and pretty much the property that made him who he became. And by the way, every time he draws Emerald Empress, and I've covered this before, but really, it's just so magnificent. I mean, his attention to detail, he really loves drawing this stuff. I'm thinking he might have been hating every step of this. I don't think so. I mean, what do you think? It doesn't look phoned in. It doesn't look like he just statted all these panels. He drew the hell out of all this stuff. And I got to say, I love this green. This sort of, it's almost like neon ink. It just really serves the story and the sort of the aesthetic hook of this issue, this annual. Again, I don't know where it stands in the Legion lore, but as a one shot, this is fantastic stuff. He hasn't lost his touch in terms of setting, in terms of pacing, in terms of juggling tons of characters, in terms of action. It's almost as if the Legion brings something out in Keith where he feels like he has to up the game. I mean, it's just, it goes from this world to that world, and it's all, and it's held together by his visual language. It's just so great to see, to witness, even this late in the game, he still has a love for this stuff, and it's manifesting itself in this one shot. You know, lots of Kirby call to battle action. But again, this is all very much his own. Again, when I say Kirby, I use that as an underpinning, right? It's just underneath the surface, but it's still very much Keith. It's unmistakably Keith. I'm not crazy about generally, I'm not crazy about super color holds like this, but it works here. It just, it's quite effective, I gotta say. And again, I am a fan of this green. It's a nice touch. And I don't usually go page by page to many of these issues because there is so much, but I think for this one, it's just worth it. There's just a lot of power and beauty to this stuff. And it is not the last we will see Keith Giffen drawing Legion. But before we get to that, there's a bunch of these fill-ins. Or for a run, you know, he did Outsiders for a bit. Again, just as an artist. Get that same vibe from that Legion annual we just saw. But now we get to see the Outsiders and the Eradicator and Metamorpho and just a bunch of DC characters, just random DC characters, which again is one of the perks of getting these comics. You know, just getting to see these different crazy versions. I mean, never the covers. He would only do the occasional variants. But what are you gonna do? Again, he's just there to like tell the story, meet the deadline, get the book out on the shelves on time. I mean, I'd love to see just the inked version of this, or even just a pencil. Yeah, so this is pre DC 52, the new 52. That was the huge line that we're on the eve of right here, where everything gets rebooted. But for now, we're just going to be telling a couple stories here and there. You got a bunch of cameos, Batman, Amanda Waller. I mean, what is not to love? You tell me. It's just fantastic stuff. I feel like DC's just wrapping it up. You know, they're just putting a bow on everything. But before then, he did draw this cover for Star Trek Meets Legion. And if you're wondering to yourself, oh man, I really wish I could see the black and white version of this because this color is really distracting and it muddles everything, well, you're in luck because there's a black and white version of that stuff. There you go. And it's great. This is a variant. This might have been cover B or C. What's it say? Cover B. And then this is a variant. You could see the Legion in the back. Just it's like his return to Legion in a way. So when I mentioned DC 52, Dan Didio was writing O.M.A.C. And so Giffen was drawing. That's the book he was drawing. And this issue 0 came out a little after the fact, but for the story purposes, just to quickly give you a taste of his O.M.A.C. version, it's like it's Kirby's character, Kirby creation, O.M.A.C. And so they were, that was a reboot. That was a straight up reboot. Again, the DC universe was getting a facelift, top to bottom. And there he is. It's a pretty cool final shot, the end. Now, this came afterwards. It's an issue 0. It came afterwards, the actual series. Normally, I see these in issue format, but I got the trade for this, not only because it's more convenient, but because it has great back matter. It shows this alternate cover for one of the issues. This is the issue that I almost saw print, but he changed it last minute. It's in black and white. You get to see some of his pencils for this stuff, some character designs. You don't get this stuff anywhere else. I mean, this is fantastic stuff. I mean, you could still see that he has like an interest and a power through his work. Like he really is just delivering on all fronts. But dare I say inspired. He's into it. And I know he's not pretentious about this stuff. I know it's just a job, it's just a gig, but he seems to be into it. I mean, that's my takeaway from it, from this stuff at least. There was a fill-in somewhere here, but it's mostly Giffen. It's mostly this is through and through a Keith Giffen vehicle for sure. And in a way, this sort of unlocks more Kirbiness to come. But he's got the staging right. He's got the positions right. I mean, he's really locking into that stuff. So in a weird way, it's almost like a return to home. And around the same time, Justice League 3000 was coming out as part of the. Well, it's part of the New 52, but this is them in the future. It's like these characters, or not them, but a version of these iconic characters: Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, just in the year 3000, written by James DeMatteis and laid out by Keith Giffen. So it's the same send up, or the same sort of approach as the Justice League International. What's interesting about this collection is you get to see those layouts by Keith. Those energetic layouts that we have seen before. Oh, and by the way, the new 52 stuff, there are collections that have some layouts, but a lot of them are online. There's an archive that has them online. So there's just an example of his layouts with notes on the margins. That's his style. That was his style. These are all sketches by Howard Porter. He also did. Now there's 2 books of this volume and 2 books of this new volume. This is the second half of the story, drawn by Scott Collins this time. And in this collection, you see a lot of layouts. There you see right in the center, the Bat Cow character. More layouts. Wonderful stuff. Again, even these layouts are pretty detailed. They're not stick figures. There's a lot of consideration going on in here, a lot of notes. He's doing a lot of work so the other people could just execute, so they could just like run with it and meet the deadline, get the work done, concentrate. Around the same time, he's drawing this cover of the Great Darkness Saga, the deluxe edition, in that style. So he got to draw Darkseid. And I got to say that Darkseid, I don't think I mentioned this in the first episode, but Darkseid, he said, Keith Giffen has said that the reason he really, he got the Legion of Superheroes gig, but the reason he stuck it out was because there was a promise to work with Darkseid to bring back that Kirby villain that he loved so much. And Paul Levitz was like, "Yeah, this was the plan. This is the big reveal. This is he's sort of the linchpin of this huge epic story that I want to tell." And Keith Giffen was on board. So when that sort of solidified it for him, the reveal of Darkseid as a big bad in this storyline, which is weird because Darkseid hadn't been used around that time, with the exception of maybe Jerry Conway using him in Justice League during the summer crossover with the Justice Society, and George Perez drew it. George Perez, I think he was about to become the Justice League artist, but then Teen Titans took off. But anyway, it was around that period where the New Gods weren't really being used often. And it really took the heat of Legion of Superheroes, the Great Darkness Saga, to bring Darkseid to the fore, under Keith Giffen and Paul Levitz. So it's a significant run. It's been reprinted several times. And for this deluxe edition, he got to draw the cover, redraw yet another cover for this collection. Now, these deluxe editions are a little larger than your typical comic. And you will see here that he is back. Keith Giffen is back to Legion of Superheroes. Now, this was reported as being a 6-issue thing. He wasn't going to do a huge run, but he was going to do 6 issues. And again, it's in the middle of the huge storyline, the New 52, meaning yet another new Legion, 17 issues in. Just drops you right in the middle of stuff, of action, of a crash. And immediately we get decapitated Sunboy. And then later he is I'll let you discover how grim this gets, but it's almost like, oh yeah, Keith is back. Things are getting dark. So I don't believe Karate Kid is killed, but I'm sure everyone was expecting that. His noted hate of Karate Kid had him killed. Maybe even, God, twice, maybe. Anyway, great. I mean, straight up Kirby. This is straight up Kirby via Giffen, via Legion. So many filters. Just a great issue. And then this follow-up, he only drew the cover. He bailed for reasons unknown, but he just didn't draw the inside, but he drew this great cover. And this run was collected. Great cover by Kevin McGuire, repurposed from one of the issues. Again, worth having for some of the back matter here. Shows a Keith Giffen design of one of the characters. Again, you don't get this in any of the issues, only here. Some black and white versions of his pages, which is really neat to see considering how like overcolored this stuff is. Not overcolored, that's just the industry standard these days. It's just around this time and currently, it's just to sort of overpower the art with color, just blast it with as many color options as you could. Nothing is really subdued much, at least in a major way. This is most coloring, most everywhere, in advertising, in cover designs. That's just the way the world is at the moment, with exceptions, of course, but a lot of comics you will get to see this treatment. This was a one-shot, Masters of the Universe. It's a series that he was writing. I believe one of his relatives was a big He-Man fan, so he started writing it, and he enjoyed it. I believe he enjoyed writing this stuff, but he got the chance to draw this one. Not write it again, but he drew it. Great Hordak. Oh man. I mean, really, he's really channeling his like fourth world influence here. I mean, really, this is such a great one shot. I mean, it's really It's really strong. It's strong. It's stronger than it needs to be. It's not a fill-in. It's just like a one shot. It's not even an annual. It's just a story. It came and went. And this is sort of like a it's almost like a secret prize. Like you uncover this and you're like it's really impressive stuff. Around this time, and we're talking about 2012, 2013, we are in Kirby territory, and so we have the Forever People. And he drew this cover. I'm going to walk you through this because it goes up and down. So the Forever People are part of the Fourth World saga with the New Gods, an Apocalypse, Darkseid, and they're the Forever People. And he helped launch this book. I'm unsure if he redesigned these Kirby creations. I mean, they're based on the Kirby designs, but I'm not sure if Keith Giffen redesigned them. I mean, that's a straight up, that's Mantis. That's a straight up faithful rendition of this character. For the second issue, he drew the cover, but not the interiors. That's just Tom Grummett took over. Tom Grummett of Superman, Superboy, Teen Titans fame. Nice cover though. Nice cover here too. A great classic charging pose that he pretty much cornered the market on. But this is drawn by Jim Starlin, somebody else who has strong New Gods roots. Now, he didn't draw this cover, but he drew the interiors. And this is issue 4. So it's going steady. They just relaunched this book. They just relaunched these characters. Now they're part of the New 52 official reboot. So this was their moment. You know, there's a Green Lantern type of dude. Cut to issue 9. He drew that cover. He drew the interior. He drew Darkseid. It doesn't look like a Giffen head. Maybe that was the inker, Scott Koblish. That's what it says in the credit box. The rest of it is unmistakably Giffen, right? Doing some great cosmic stuff, some great New Gods. I mean, his love is really holding it together for him. It's really getting him through this stuff. And we're not out of Kirby territory. We have Kamandi. Or is it Kamandi? How do you say it? How did Kirby say it? Anyway, this is part of the DC Challenge. Now, if you recall back in the 80s, back in 85, 86, there was a DC Challenge book that was kind of a game of hot potato between creators. There was a creative team who would write and draw an issue, not know how it ended, and just pass it to the next creative team on the next issue. And the same thing happened here. They brought this project back. And I believe it has a couple of creative teams per issue. So it's really unpredictable. And I don't know how improv it really was. I'm sure it was. But I imagine that back in the day, really no one knew what the hell was going on. And they just produced a fun looking book. You know, Keith Giffen drew a Dr. Fate issue or Fate centric issue, or he certainly appears on the cover. And that would be in episode 3. So take a look. Don't take my word for it. But here we have him drawing Kamandi. Inked by Scott Koblish. And yeah, Dan Didio. He would pair up with Dan Didio all the time. You know, that was his writer. You know, he would go through writers for long stretches, you know, whether it be Bill Mantlo or Paul Levitz or Robert Loren Fleming or the Beer Bombs, Tom and Mary Beer Bombs. He would kind of latch onto a writer and they would do tons of work together, right? And so we're almost getting out of Kirby territory because he drew this cover. He drew this variant cover for Metal Men. Has nothing to do with Metal Men, but he just drew an O.M.A.C in his sort of later style. This is the late style. Now, around this time, there was I gotta say, there's that this was one of the final works that he did, and so this was around 2018. This is straight up 2020. Now, I met Keith Giffen in 2018 at HeroesCon, and the folks at Heroes lovingly made a panel happen between me and Keith, and I got Kyle Pinion to moderate it. And this wasn't recorded, so but from what I remember, it turned out to be pretty much like an ambush bug issue in panel form, because I would just have a bunch of random questions, fanboying out on him, and he would answer in his very like honest, unfiltered way. And it was great. We all had a gas. It was awesome. It was also on the heels of me working on Bloodstrike, which was a project that I cultivated around that time based on the issues that he drew, or sorry, that he laid out and wrote for Rob Liefeld. But it was funny when I asked him about that, he barely remembered it. I mean, it sort of opened my eyes, and I sort of it was expecting that, in that he, like, why would he remember that? It's like it's funny that I dedicated my life to this project during that time period for something that he did 35 years prior on a Thursday. Like, why would he remember that? So it was sort of amusing in that way. And that's sort of something I took from him in general, was this sort of unsentimentality of this material, of this career. Like, you take it seriously and you work and you're diligent and you're a nice guy and you're great to work with, but you don't take it too seriously. You just don't love it to that degree. That's for the fans to love. You could still love it, but like, care about the right things, right? And that was sort of eye-opening for me, because reading all these articles or interviews with creators I love, for them not to share that level of passion about that work that you love, that to me just threw me off as an aspiring creator, as a fan, and as an aspiring cartoonist. So anyway, that panel was fantastic. He let it be known that he doesn't care about original art. He never kept it. He never kept his own comics. He had no collection. And so there was something beautiful and zen about that. That's certainly not my reality, but it was a grass is greener kind of thing. It's like, I kind of want that. What would it be like to just let go of all this stuff, and not care about owning this stuff, and just sitting down and producing and moving forward and just kind of churning stuff out month after month, after year after year, after decade. I mean, he was like living proof of that approach. And so, yeah, I had a ball. Talking to him. I didn't bug him too much. I hope he had an okay time. I know that conventions weren't his favorite thing. Interviews weren't his favorite thing, but he was very gracious and very kind to me, very cool. And yeah, so we had an hour for me to just geek out over this stuff. And I did. So around this time, though, I want to show he did this. This was a Kickstarter. This was some sort of Kickstarter campaign. The Liberty Brigade, the Heroes Files. Now, this is an anthology book that has people like Jerry Ordway and Alan Davis and Kevin McGuire and Keith Giffen. Now, I believe he inked this. There's no other credit with his name, so it looks like he inked it. It doesn't look like it's shot from pencils either, unless it's very meticulous pencils, which he's done. But yeah, there's something about it that looks like, yeah, he inked it. And sort of like that Metal Men O.M.A.C cover, it's in that style. It's like, it's very sharp around the edges. Let's see. See those biceps, see the rubble. I mean, it's strong stuff. It's still Kirby. It's still post Kirby Giffen, but it's just scratchier in a way. The way Frank Miller developed into a very cartoonish sort of approach to his work, and then his bodies are just huge shapes and big brush strokes and big marks. That's what this reminds me of. It's not like that at all, but it's in that direction of mark making, of shape building. And so his final work was Inferior 5. He developed this with Jeff Lemire, cartoonist Jeff Lemire. And this was sold as Stranger Things meets Twin Peaks. And Inferior 5 being an old property of DC, which is very goofy and just, very Silver Agey. This is not that at all. This is, there's moments of meta in here. It is creepy. It is moody. Now, I got this collection. I usually get issues, but sometimes I get collections. And this collection I got not only because it's convenient, and you see him rocking a sort of McFarlane-esque style for this, which, it's in service of the story itself, but you get to see classic Giffen, the half-shrouded face, the cartoonish proportions, the clutter, blocking in panels, nice coloring, nice inking. Now the inker is Michelle Dalecki. Michelle apparently was handpicked by Keith. He knew her, and she was the only inker that he had ever requested to work with. Up until that point, he just got whoever he got. Half the time he didn't even know who he was going to get. He was surprised that he got Larry Malstead for all those years during Legion. Or, in the beginning, I'm sure after a while he got used to Larry. They were a great combination. But anyway, this story is cool. I mean, it's like his final thing, it was supposed to be 6 issues, and it was 6 issues. There's Tasmanian Devil. That's a great callback to his earlier run on Justice League. And Jeff did the backups where he wrote Andrew his own segments featuring Peacemaker and KG Beast. I mean, all this stuff is just right up my alley. You know this. There's Keith. He drew 4 issues and then things stopped. And this was during the pandemic. This is 2019, 2020. I mean, it started 2019, but then by this point already 2020. The 5th issue came out online. It was a webcomic. It came out many months later. And the 6th issue was also online, but it wasn't drawn by Keith. I believe that's Scott Collins who finished it. But anyway, Keith did draw the penultimate chapter. And there's another cool Superman shot. Again, it's always a kick. And, fade to white. And that is it. That is it. Now, Keith passed away October 9th, 2023. He was 70 years old. And the inker, Michelle Dalecki, wrote that they were pretty much neighbors in Florida. So he was living in Florida. And judging by the interviews that I've heard with Keith, he loved playing video games and margaritas and just chilling out in Florida. So those last few years, he drew a little bit, but he was concentrating on his family and his personal life. And so yeah, that was huge. But just to wrap it up, I mean, I know that's pretty much all his work. But in the beginning of this series, I started with this issue, Galumph, number 2. Yeah, number 2. Now this, if you recall, he drew this story right here. And this was his first published work in 1973, right? He drew that story, and he drew a Von Bodie spoof. Now, this was a college publication in 1973, but he also had this, The National Galumph, which came out in 1974. This is his second published work in this spoof satire magazine, sort of like it's trying to be a National Lampoon situation. National Galumph. It's just a satiric magazine that has a comic section. And it's a bunch of people drawing it. But here, he drew the Legion of Super Assassins. Now, he must have been 24, maybe 22. I think he was 22. In 1974, he was 22. Hadn't broken in yet, but you could already tell the Kirby. So he wasn't drawing Kirby because Jim Shooter told him to draw like that. He was already doing Kirby. Very reminiscent of the Rick Veitch zombie comic that he did. You know, they were both rocking Kirby in this sort of underground way. That's him penciling. I don't believe that's him inking, but he is penciling this stuff. Already you have huge, let's see, just get the whole comic in here. It's it's goofy stuff story-wise, and it's very interesting to see him rock the Kirby, you know, with this crazy like inking all over the place approach, which you'll find in Young works everywhere. You know, interesting to see this formation, this panel formation that he would later carry on through his career. Lots of mark making. Again, we saw that in the previous Galumph, but he's easing up on that now. This nice transition, this 3-panel. It's not really a transition, but it's just a rhythmically, it's just like a 3-beat thing that he would do a lot. You know, that would be a tick that he would develop. Pencils by Keith Giffen, inks by Bob Simon and friends. So who knows who inked what? Only they know. Interesting stuff. Now, in terms of Legion, there's this companion, which is amazing. This is a great book on its own, just for all sorts of interviews and stuff. But he would do this. He would do these long interviews, you know, and he served as an artist for the Legion for a long time. So there's tons of ground to cover. And so what this features is black and white art. Now, this was published in 2003, I believe. So it's the first time we saw these Legion drawings, these sketches, right? There's a couple more here. This has never been published anywhere except Legion Outpost. And again, those issues are pretty difficult to come by. I've never seen one, but luckily it's been reprinted here. And this seems to be like the poster burnout style. Like he's right on the cusp of that. He's drawing those figures in that same way. Those sort of expressions are very 1982 to me. So that's that first run, and then there's this run of the 5 years later. But before that, those sketches in the back appeared in this. Remember this? Deluxe edition. About a decade later, they got reprinted here, so you see these up close. Look at that, him drawing Karate Kid. He must have hated drawing that. Looks like fun though. Just kind of redesigning everyone, giving them their own little look. See, that's the original cover of the first cover of the original collection of the stuff. It's what Paul would give to Keith to then go draw. You know, it's this is pretty much a plot for a page per page. Keith would go home, draw it to his own whimsy. He would just change stuff up and then bring it to Paul, and Paul would change more stuff up just to mess with Keith, or just to really just give us the more interesting story. And I mean, it seems like that's a fruitful process. Anyway, 5 years later, he's pretty honest about this stuff, about his frustrations with the editorial and the never really with the audience, really. I mean, sort of, he recognized that he was pushing buttons, that he was being provocative in certain areas. He was being challenging overall. But during this time, during the Heckler and then Trencher and Punks, it was a weird time. It was a weird time. Now, I got to say, this book is fantastic. Seek it out. Seek it out. But just a few more issues of back issue that has tons of interviews, just to bring this episode to a close. Now, here we talk to Kevin McGuire It's an interview with him, J.M. DeMatteis as well. And in here, you just get to see just cool artwork. You know, that's what these back issue magazines are good for. This is the layout that Keith did for the very first splash page of the very first issue, featuring Guy Gardner at a table. Incredible stuff. Just imagine getting this little mini comic that Keith would draw and just give to you, give to the writer, to then do layouts, to then do scripting, to then give to the penciler. There's a famous one punch scene right before it. He gives you everything. And Kevin Maguire, if you know this page, he followed it to a T. I mean, he was a young creator. Other creators like Bart Sears would be a little more experimental in their own approach. But there was that foundation that could be found in the 52 storyline. There's that one punch. So that's this issue. Then there's this issue talking about Ambush Bug. Again, these interviews are great because they really focus on a subject and they go deep into it. This is also interviewing Robert Lauren Fleming, the writer of The Ambush Bug. There's a good picture of them. A rare picture of Keith and Robert together. I'd never seen it before. It's good. That looks like when I met Keith. I can't tell you. That was great. Anyway, this is what I was talking about, the Darkseid and Justice League. But then really it was his standing in the Legion that put him over. This is an issue about crossovers. And so, of course, they cover Invasion, my favorite crossover from DC. So it's got a few tidbits in there that's worth seeking out. This issue of Back Issue, great cover by Steve Lytle, but also great art, great Legion art by Keith Giffen and Greg LaRocque. I mean, it's a Legion issue, so it's fantastic all the way through. But here we get that black and white version, which we've seen before, but not in this good of printing. It's a great black and white rendition of this cover, which you see Darkseid's face. It's kind of obscured in the way it was printed in the actual cover, but not here. This is another great issue, worth it. Lots of interviews, lots of art. And then there's this. This came out after Keith had passed away. This was in the works. And it's just a generally fantastic send off to Keith. I mean, you see some original pencils. And by the way, if you look online, you will see all sorts of rarities that never saw print. There's like old fan art that he did. There's also unpublished pages in what looks to be from Book of Fate, one of my favorite Keith Giffen comics. And so, yeah, this issue, this tribute issue, pretty much just covers it all. You know, there's a checklist for people's favorite Giffen stories or stories that he just laid out, even or wrote. You know, like that Book of Fate I was just talking about. Seriously, you got to hunt that stuff in. Oh, I should mention that he co-created the new Blue Beetle during this time period, during the Infinite Crisis, with Cully Hamner, I believe, was the designer of that. So that was during his major writing phase during Annihilation. So he was even, I got to say, even up to the end, he was creating these huge properties for these companies, like new characters, new concepts, new books. So not only was he helping out other creators develop stuff and put books out, he was doing his own stuff. He was doing his own work, bringing these new characters to life. And these are all major characters. They've been featured in movies and television shows and whatever. That to me is just, it's interesting because it just shows a sort of level of commitment and passion and skill and talent that you don't see every day. Not many people make it as far as he did. I mean, he's, other people go to other careers, and he certainly tried writing for animation and shopping scripts around and stuff, and working in I believe he worked on as an art director or art department on Spider-Man Unlimited, Batman Beyond, Static Shock. This was around the late 90s, early aughts. So he's varied. He was diversifying his portfolio, as they say. There was no work. He couldn't get arrested, as he said about that time period. But then DC and Marvel wanted him, so that's where he went. He started working there, and that's where he kind of remained to the end of his career. It's primarily for DC. It was just a consistent sort of spot that nurtured him, and he nurtured the fans, even though, he was frustrated by the realities of the industry, even then, as he would write in his CBR column, and having to tour and having to do shows and stuff. And his interest was really just telling stories. That's why he doesn't care about creating the whole thing and just making it his own. He's making it his own by way of being part of a team, bringing stories into life, whether he's drawing somebody else's story or he's writing it for people. And he wrote tons of stuff. I mean, you should look up that would be a different set of episodes to cover just what he wrote. I'm just sticking to the visual aspect of the stuff because it's what I respond to the most. It's how I discovered him. It's how I appreciate his work and his legacy is through his visuals, through his artwork. All this stuff is basically opinion. I'm just looking at this stuff. I'm not an academic. I'm not an archivist. I'm not a comics historian. I think that's just sort of a lofty term for a dude with tons of comics. That's what I have. I have a Keith Giffen collection of comic books, but I look at it seriously. I take this stuff seriously. I've dedicated my life to just looking at this stuff. And so I looked at Keith Giffen's work with a curious eye, a critical eye, but always loving eye. It's just stuff I've been wanting to talk about his work for so long, and I wasn't sure how to do it. Really, it started off as oftentimes a lot of the stuff I do starts off as like, maybe I'll do a zine. I'll just do a little thing, and then it evolves into like a larger project. I even thought about doing a post or a series of essays, or maybe in comic book form, and maybe post it on the Comics Journal as a sort of response to the Comics Journal pieces that wrote about Keith back in the day, right? And I would maybe even draw it in his evolving styles. But that doesn't really play to my strengths, and I'm not really interested in that stuff anyway. In approaching it in that way, I'd rather look at the work itself. And that led to this video series, which is really outside of my comfort zone. I don't really do this kind of stuff, but I thought the work demanded this level of scrutiny. And I don't know, I just had to do it. It kind of came naturally after a while, because this is pretty much the way I engage with the stuff, the way I talk. If you've been dived with me, that this is just me. It's just hanging out with me, looking at comics. And so loving this stuff as much as I do, again, I had to relearn how to reckon with my love for this stuff, right? Where it's like, knowing that Keith didn't, the way I saw it at a time where he didn't really care about this stuff, the way I said he doesn't keep original art, doesn't have a comic collection. The way I took that, I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't care about this stuff more than the artist does. But two things: that's not up to the artist, that's up to the audience. And me being part of the audience, I could care as much or as strongly as I want. I could obsess as strongly as I want. But also, the second thing is that he did obviously care. He just cares differently and about different things. He cares about the stuff that matters, really, which is putting the work out there. He doesn't care about collecting it. Doesn't care about looking back. So both of those things could exist. First of all, we're two different people. And this time I'm the audience. I'm the one who's like taking the time to look at all this stuff because it matters to me, because I found it important to my own development as a cartoonist, as a thinker, as a person with a career in comics. And so I don't know, he's a strong force. Keith Giffen, idiosyncratic creator, had his own point of view, a strong one, and he left us with a huge, awesome body of work, mountains of comics that I've looked at for 6 episodes. So I appreciate you being here. I really do. Thank you. I hope if you were curious about Keith Giffen, if you didn't know who he was, or just wanted a refresher on the greatness that was Keith Giffen, I hope you enjoyed this video series. It's been great. It's been a privilege to even talk about this stuff. I mean, it's just getting to flip through these comics is it truly felt right. It felt good, and I'm glad I got to do it in service of Keith Giffen's vision. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. My name is Michel Fiffe, and this is the Fiffe Files. Fiffe Files.